So before we do a critique question, really it's very important that you know how to handle a question that has got implications for the auditor's report. Now, let me just explain it a little bit. Now, there are two kinds of questions that have got implications for the auditor's report. Let me just explain. The first one is when we are dealing with something relating to misstatement or maybe a limitation of scope. The other one is a going concern question. You have got the same kind of requirements here as well, but the way that we do the question is slightly different. Now, if it is a limitation or a misstatement kind of a question, then the exam technique that I use is called NSOB. This is following the guidance in ISA 705. So what is the meaning of N? N simply means nature. Nature of the auditor's report or audit opinion, the nature of it, whether it is going to be this or whether it is going to be this. Then we're going to talk about the severity. Severity has got 2 points inside there. You need to consider whether it is material, and whether it is pervasive. So I'm not going to go into the teaching mode here. Yeah, you should already know that your exam's on Monday. Then after that, we're going to think about what kind of opinion that we're going to give as a result of this, whether it is a misstatement or a limitation, what kind of opinion. And then finally, we're going to bring in the part about the basis paragraph. So if it is this kind of a question, that's your exam technique, NSOB. Now, we have got the same kind of heading for a going concern question as well, but this one is slightly different. You've got to read the exam question carefully. Usually the examiner would say, what are the matters to consider? Okay, so the matters to consider will always be the disclosures required by IS1. So you have to put that down, and you're probably going to get 3 marks for that, for putting down the disclosures, the conditions that the client is facing, management plans to overcome that, and a statement that the company is facing a material uncertainty. All right, so that's 3 marks inside there. Then after that, you're going to talk about if there is adequate disclosure, what it would be like, and if there's inadequate disclosure, what it will be like. So if there's adequate disclosure, remember the exam question here says implications for the auditor's report. Implications for the auditor's report. So if it is for the auditor's report here, then here you have got to talk about if there's adequate disclosure, then how is the opinion going to be like? What is the opinion going to be like? And then after that, you are going to have an MURGC paragraph. Now, can you use this short form MURGC? Now, because we are dealing with a question that says implications for the auditor's report, there's always the possibility that the student knows these alphabets, but they don't know what it stands for. Therefore, if you're dealing with an implications for the auditor's report, you are required to say material uncertainty related to going concern, and then you can put it there. Because this word, material uncertainty related to going concern, is a technical term in this kind of question. So for those of you who are just joining us, we are looking at a critique question, but a critique of an audit report question. But before we do that, it's very important that we understand this simple part first. If you don't understand NSOB, it is unlikely that you're going to be able to do a critique question in a systematic manner. Critique questions are an absolute nightmare if you do not have an if you don't have an exam technique. Seriously. Okay, so because it says auditor's report here, we have got to talk about this. Now on this side, what is it? So we've got the word auditor's report there, and the impact on the auditor's report is actually these two things here. Okay, but the way that we interpret it is different according to the type of question that we have. Now, on the area of inadequate disclosure, you have got to think about whether it is inadequate, and we're talking about a material uncertainty, or whether we are talking about a significant MU. So this question here would usually be about 7-8 marks or something like that. So you need to know how to handle it. So if it's a going concern question, and I know it sounds the same, but it really is not an SOB. Okay? So this one here, then you're going to give your opinion. If it's only an MU and it's inadequate disclosure, then your opinion here would be except for. Now, if you put that down in your answer, how many marks are you going to get actually for putting down the opinion here? So the opinion here is going to be an unqualified opinion. So that will be 1 mark inside here, and there will be 1 mark inside here for that. But if you said opinion qualified except for, how many marks would you get? 0. That's right, 0. Why? Because even though it is correct, there are 2 kinds of qualified except for. So what you need to say here is the opinion will be qualified except for, seeing that the financial statements are materially misstated due to non-compliance with IAS 1. The disclosures, I mean. All right. So this qualified except for here, let me just change the color a bit, is to do with this one, qualified except for misstatement, because there's another except for, which is an except for limitation of scope. So unless you put this down in full, so I always, for just as a internal control, if you like, I always say, seeing that the financial statements are materially misstated. When it comes to ethics question, I always put the thread in that. It's a form of internal control that I have so that I do not forget to put that down, because you forget to put that down and that's it. All your hard work is just gone down the drain. Might as well not even answer that question. Okay. Then after that, you have got the basis paragraph. Then you're going to say that the reason for the modification will be explained in the basis for qualified opinion paragraph and be positioned immediately following the opinion paragraph. Okay, so an area of that. So this is what you're going to say. All right, so there are 2 things here. Remember, this one is going to be 1 mark here. And then this one, you are going to talk about this one here. The reason will be explained here. That will be half a mark inside here. And then the positioning here would be another half mark. So you need to know all of this in order that you get the maximum marks inside here. Okay, so how does the marking scheme work? You're probably going to get 2 or 3 for specifying what the disclosures are, because usually this kind of exam question will ask you to explain what are the matters to consider. And then after that, and the implications on the auditor's report. So you're going to say there's adequate disclosure, there's 2 marks here for each one, and inadequate disclosure is another 2 marks here. And then you're going to put down for inadequate disclosure, significant MU. I'm just going to copy paste that just to save a little bit of time. So this one, the opinion is going to be adverse, seeing that here would be the basis for adverse opinion, and the rest of it is exactly the same. So I've got 2 marks here, I've got 2 marks here, I've got 2 marks here, and I've got 3 marks here. So please manage your marks well. You don't have to write everything down. Remember, you're not a lecturer in the exam, you're not a tutor in the exam. Just follow the number of marks and stick to the time. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to put both of this down is because students usually get confused between these 2 kinds of questions, because it sounds exactly the same. But you know what? The exam technique is totally different, and the way the marks are awarded are also totally different. So now we can go on to the critique question. The critique question, well, the critique question actually, it can involve anything, any standard to do with, you know, the 700 series. You've got 705 on the area, you know, the qualification that we're dealing with just now. It could be on emphasis on matter paragraph that has been wrongly used. It could be key audit matter paragraph that has been wrongly used. It could be 720 that has been wrongly used as well. So these are some of the things that can come out. So let's go and have a look. It says here, critically appraise the draft audit report for this year end. Now, I chose this question because it was a little bit more challenging than the usual critique questions that we get. Okay. And they're giving us 10 marks inside here, so it's really quite huge. Now, the meaning of critically appraise does not mean criticize. Critically appraise means use a benchmark. That means use a particular audit standard, the 700 series, and appraise the draft auditor's report. So if inside the draft auditor's report they've done something correctly, we're going to say, good job, correctly done. And if they've done something wrong, then we need to say you've done something wrong and then explain why we think that they've done something wrong. Okay, then after that, it was very interesting. It says, identify and explain other matters to be considered and the actions to be taken by the auditor in respect of a management-imposed limitation of scope. Interesting. Quite huge number of marks as well. So it says here, you're the manager responsible for the audit of Willis, large client, operating in the pharmaceutical industry. This is an old question. The audit work for the year ended 31 August is nearly complete. So this is after the year end. Okay, this is the year end and you're sitting for the exam in December. And you're reviewing the draft audit report, which has been prepared by your senior. You're aware that Willis is developing a new drug and has incurred significant research and development costs during the year, most of which have been capitalized as an intangible. The asset is recognized at 4.4 million. So whatever that they have capitalized here, they have recognized it at a value of 4.4 million. Total assets is 55 million, so they can calculate materiality. And their PBT is 3.1, which is so weird. Because if you look at this figure, this is 4.4 and this one is 3.1. And if this whole thing was to be written off, it would turn a profit into a loss, right? So can I ask you something? When an audit adjustment turns a profit into a loss, do you call that material or do you call that pervasive? All right, so I've got lots of comments down here. Let me tell you, it is material. It is only material. There are 3 ways in which materiality can be assessed. Okay, this is just some of my class notes here. Okay. So if you want to find out whether something is material, there are actually 3 ways to assess materiality. Material by value, this is when you do the calculation here. And material by impact, where your adjustment can turn a big profit to a small profit, or turn a profit into a loss, or cause a debt covenant to be breached. And then you have got by nature, would be talking about the disclosure, like in the case of related party transactions. If they're not disclosed, they are material by nature. Why? Because even a transaction at 0 value is considered to be material. Whereas if you have a post-balance sheet event that is non-adjusting, that also requires a disclosure, right? But that disclosure will come under disclosure by value. It is not disclosure by nature. Because if the non-adjusting event, the dollar value is 0, you won't even bother about it, right? It will be totally different from the related party transaction thing, where even if it's $0 value, it's considered to be material by nature. Okay, so just now, if it turns a profit into a loss, it would still be material by impact. That's not pervasive. Very important point that the examiner highlights in the examiner's report. Okay. So then going down here, having reviewed the audit working papers, you're also aware that management has not allowed the audit team to access the results of the scientific tests and trials performed on the new drug being developed. We've got absolutely no idea. Management has not allowed. Not good at all. Okay. So it looks like here it's more of a limitation of scope. Limitation of scope simply means that whatever that they've capitalized here, we've got no idea whether it's misstated or not. No idea. So they've given us the extract, and this is only the extract, okay? So don't put inside your answer that they don't have the addressee, they don't have the title. This is only this extract. They've got a paragraph here called Basis of Opinion, a title here, and it says, evidence available to us in respect of the intangible asset was limited because of restrictions imposed on our work by management. As a result of this, we've been unable to verify the appropriateness of the amount capitalized, and we're worried that the asset may be overvalued. Because of the significance of the item and the lack of integrity shown by management, pretty serious comments made here by the auditor, we've been unable to form an opinion or form a view on the financial statements as a whole. It's kind of weird because it's only one item here and they're giving you an opinion, which is pervasive. Because of the lack of evidence we could gain over the intangible asset, we're unable to form an opinion as to whether the financial statements are properly prepared in accordance with the relevant financial reporting framework. Okay. So, in summary, we're looking at this extract and we're trying to critique it. So, we need an exam technique. The exam technique is going to be like this. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to critique the opinion to see whether the opinion has been correctly determined. So the first thing we're going to do here, remember the NSOB? Okay, so I'm going to think about nature. We're not going to do the whole thing here, but we're going to say here that when we talk about the nature here, we're saying that there can only be two kinds of nature of opinion. We have got misstatement and we've got limitation of scope. That's all. We just want to arrive at that conclusion. Access the results of the scientific tests on the new drug being developed. And as a result of that, the auditor does not know if this project is technically feasible. And of course, if we don't know if it's technically feasible, then we won't know whether it is profitable either. And then we come to the conclusion down here that this is management imposed limitation of scope. Because management was the one who did not permit us. So the nature here, okay, we've got the nature here. This is a limitation of scope, but it's not just any limitation of scope, it's management imposed limitation of scope. So now we are trying to critique it. Okay, so for those of you just joining us, we are doing this question called Willis, and so let's just carry on. So when you're critiquing it, it is not NSOB directly. We're saying that this is what it should be. Now we're saying what they have done in the extract. The opinion in the extract was a disclaimer, wasn't it? So then I'm going to explain. A disclaimer is given when there is a limitation of scope. And therefore, the nature of this opinion, this disclaimer of opinion, is correct. Disclaimer is a limitation. We're saying the situation is a limitation. So the nature of this opinion is correct. And then we're saying that this is not a misstatement. It's a limitation of scope. So you've got to remember that if the exam question asks you to critique, you have to critique. If you answer it in terms of an NSOB question, then you're not critiquing. And if you don't obey the requirement of the question, you're not going to get the marks. So we're saying that we've come to this conclusion, and that's what they've done, and that's sort of right. Now we're going on further. Just going to borrow that format here under NSOB. The next thing that we're going to do is deal with the severity. So the opinion in the extract is a disclaimer. A disclaimer simply means that the effect is material and pervasive. That's what it means. Now we're going to try and relate it to what's happening inside the scenario. Is it material? Is it pervasive? So if you look at whether it is material, the question tells you that this intangible asset, it is worth 4.4 million. And if you compare it with the total asset figure here, the total asset is 55 million, so it represents 8%. It is material. Now, if the whole 4.4 million is written off, because now let me explain a little bit here, okay? Let's go back to basics here. Okay. So we're looking at the meaning of the word material, and we're looking at the meaning of the word pervasive. Okay, I'm going to use two different colors here. I've already done this at the revision, but we've got lots of newcomers here. So let's have a look. Before the audit adjustment, the profit figure was 100,000. The audit adjustment is 90,000. So if they'd put it through, it would have turned a big profit to a small profit, right? Therefore, in that sense, this is considered to be material by nature. However, if you have a look at the definition of pervasive, pervasive means that the problem is not confined to specific items. What does that mean? That means many items. Or if so confined, could represent a substantial proportion of the financial statements, which is what we have here. So if you have a look at that 90 here, I know it turned a big profit here into a small profit. So it's material by impact. But if you look at the percentage itself, if you look at the 90,000, that is actually 90% of the profit figure. Isn't that a substantial proportion? So what this means here is that this audit adjustment is both material and pervasive. So you need to be familiar with the definitions of both of them to be able to work this out. So a disclaimer of opinion would actually be correct. But then, and so now I'm a little confused now. Is it that we were not able to obtain the evidence for the whole of the financial statements? So remember, it's a critique question. So therefore, so now I'm coming up with my conclusion down here. Now, it really depends on how you argue this thing out, really. You could have continued with it and said, yes, disclaimer is correct because we already came to the conclusion here. You're right. It represents a substantial proportion of the profit figure. And if you cannot get evidence relating to that, and if, let's say, the whole thing was not technically feasible and you had to write it off, can you imagine the shareholders, you're showing them a particular profit when in actual fact the profit might not even be there. It might actually be a loss. So it could actually be a disclaimer, and that would have been valid. And if you had followed it through to look at the exam question here and say that this wording here is not right for a disclaimer, you would still have gotten marks. Okay, but I'm taking a slightly different approach. So the exam technique here is this. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to put down the critique the opinion. And as usual, when you're going to critique the opinion, we're always thinking about NS. Remember here, in order for you to arrive at the opinion, you have to go through the N and to the S. Okay, so now that we've already done that, now let's come to the second part. The second part I'm going to critique is the format and the wording. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to color this in blue. Can you see the blue? Okay, and we're going to follow through with the blue. Let me just change that. Okay, so here the first thing we're going to do is we're going to critique the opinion paragraph title. So I'm going to start with that. Don't have to underline in the exam. So then I'm saying here, remember we're critiquing this. So if I've come to the conclusion that, by the way, those of you who have just joined us, we're doing this question called Willis. It's a critique question, right? Maybe you just found the link to today's session. Don't worry, the videos will be uploaded onto YouTube, and if you can't get a hold of me, just WhatsApp me and I'll tell you what to do. That's sitting right in the middle of my answer. Don't do that in the exam. So the opinion title. So we're saying that, remember here we came to, this is the correct one. So now we're critiquing the extract. So we're saying that if the opinion is qualified except for, now remember we're critiquing, so now we've got to go back to the exam question to see what kind of title they gave. They gave it as disclaimer on view given by financial statements. Okay, and not that. So can you see that I'm critiquing it? I'm not just saying what the title should be, I'm actually critiquing it. And that would be 1 mark. Can you imagine how easy it is? And the next thing that we're going to go on to is the opinion paragraph, but it would be the wording of the opinion paragraph. Remember, the wording of the opinion paragraph is also part of the extract here. So we're saying here, the opinion paragraph here, the wording. Of course, you could have taken this question in a totally different way and said that disclaimer was correct. Then you're going to use here, the title would be disclaimer of opinion if you had taken it that way. So if the opinion is qualified except for, then the wording should be, so what would the wording be? Then since we're dealing with a disclaimer, but sorry, not disclaimer, a limitation of scope, but it's mature but not pervasive, then we're going to say that it should be, okay, now can you see that when I'm critiquing it, I critique the opinion first, so I arrived at this blue wording here, then the rest of it is saying if this is the right thing, then this one is wrong. So after that, we're going to go on to the basis paragraph. I'm just getting all the easy marks here. Basis paragraph. Now, when you're dealing with the basis paragraph, it always has to be the title and the position. Always. When you're dealing with the opinion paragraph, you are only dealing with the title. You're not going to talk about the position because it's ridiculous to be talking about the same thing. The position of the basis paragraph will be following the opinion paragraph, right? So there's no point saying the opinion paragraph will be preceding the basis paragraph. Then you're talking about the same thing. You'd just be wasting time. You're not going to get any extra marks for that. So if the opinion is qualified except for, so it will be titled, so we've got that. All right. So we're saying that it would be immediately following the opinion paragraph. But remember, we are critiquing it. Therefore, and not. So we're critiquing it. That means we've got to constantly refer to the extract inside there. So we've got 1 mark here, yeah, on the nature, and then on the area of the severity here, because it's a unique question, we had to talk about whether it is material. So the materiality here is given 1 mark by itself. Then to talk about the pervasive here, we are saying it is pervasive, and then here we are saying it is not pervasive because it's only 1 item. All right, then here you've got 1 mark, 1 mark, 1 mark. So the whole thing is 10 marks. Now, the next thing that we've got to do is go and have a look at the wording of the basis paragraph. All right, the basis paragraph. Now, here is where it becomes difficult. In order for you to do this, you have to understand a few things, and I'm sure you already do. I'm just revising it. You need to know the content of the basis paragraph. So if it is a misstatement, this is the content. You introduce a financial statement item. You talk about the item here. Then you talk about the dollar value. That's the meaning of introduce the item. Of course, if it's a limitation, again, we're going to talk about the item and we're going to talk about the dollar value. So that needs to be done. If it is a misstatement, then you're going to say that management has not done the right thing. And of course, these two areas are sort of linked because they are tied up with the accounting standards. So management has not, and this is a violation of a particular accounting standard. And then you need to put down the financial effect. The financial effect will be the actual misstatement here. This is a misstatement. Put it in red now. Okay. Then after that, the impact on the rest of the major lines in the financial statements. So what do we have here? We introduce a financial statement item. Management has not, departure from, financial effect, and the impact. I memorize it using an acronym. It's not really an acronym. It's just a bunch of alphabets. Okay. So I'm thinking about IMDFI. So those are the things that are found in the basis paragraph. Introduce a financial statement item. Management has not, the departure from, financial effect of it, and the impact on the rest of the financial statement items. Okay, let's go and have a look at limitation. So limitation, you still have to introduce a financial statement item. You have to put down the amount, and then you have to put down the reason that we were denied access, for example, here, and the consequences. Consequently, we were unable to determine whether any adjustments for this amount were necessary. So for a limitation of scope, it's slightly simpler. So I'm just going to copy that And we're going to go here. So we're more interested on this part here, isn't it? So where's our, hang on, let me just take that out and put it here so that we don't have to keep scrolling up and down. So we've got the basis paragraph here. Remember, we are now at this stage, okay, the basis paragraph stage. So let me just take this out here because we've already dealt with that. So remember, what was the rule? You have to introduce the financial statement item. Did they introduce the financial statement item? They said it was an intangible, but what kind of intangible? Was it goodwill? Was it license? They did not. So I'm going to critique here that it does not introduce the financial statement item. Okay? Okay, so that is one thing. The paragraph does not do that. Not only that, included inside here would also be the dollar value. It does not quantify the financial statement item. There's no dollar value inside here. So we're saying that it would have been appropriate. Remember, we're critiquing it. It would have been appropriate. All right. Now, I want you to look here. The limitation here, it says, the group's investment in XYZ, a foreign associate acquired during the year accounted for the equity method, is carried at so much in the SOFP. Can you see that? So here, we're making it very clear where the figure is. So that's why we're putting it here. So the basis paragraph does not quantify the financial statement item. Then after that, we're going to look at the next part, which is the reason. So what does it say here? Because the restrictions imposed by on our work by management, but there are no details actually. Does not explain the reason for the modification. What does it say? Merely states that there were restrictions imposed by management. It would have been more appropriate to say that, all right, to be more specific, because you did not explain what kind of restrictions and what area of work. So going back here, these are the rules found in ISO 705, by the way. So the reason why I'm doing it in detail is because you need to know that I'm not just pulling my answer out of thin air. We are following the auditing standard. All right, we're following the auditing standard. So this one is not a misstatement, so we're not so worried about the reason. So this one, the next thing here is the consequences. Let's go back up here, borrowing this. Remember, we're critiquing it, so there has to be the two sides of the coin, something like that. Yeah, so we've covered this area. So it's very common that in the critique question, we actually get a lot of marks from the basis paragraph itself. Okay, so now that you've finished that, so there'll be 1 mark each here, yeah? And it says here, we've got some words that we are worried. And these are all unprofessional marks. A lack of integrity shown by management. I tell you, you're opening yourself up to a defamatory suit. That'd be terrible. So you have got some unprofessional wording as well. All right. So that part about that we are worried, that part is unprofessional. It might be a valid concern. I'm not writing it out in full. We don't have much time. Okay. So unprofessional. And the other one here is so this one here is not professional either, and it's also accusatory. You might open yourself up to a defamatory suit, so it's kind of dangerous as well. So that's how you do a critique question. All right, so the exam technique here is you critique the opinion first, and then you critique the format and the wording. So if you do it systematically, then you won't be repeating yourself. So the way that we do it here is you start off with the opinion paragraph. Okay, that's the opinion paragraph here. Then after that, you work with the basis paragraph, title position. Then after that, it is the basis paragraph, and you're dealing with the wording. If you do it this way, it is so much more systematic. You don't have to write a lot, and you will not be catching your tail. So that's really very easy. So we're finished with that question. Now, just the last few minutes. Oh my goodness, it's 10:30. Okay. So just some last few minutes. you're sitting for your exam here. Someone's just joining us. Hello. We're just about to finish. So we're looking at the easy marks. Oops. Where are your easy marks? Your easy marks are all in your question 1. So I would advise you to start with your question 1. Or if you want to start with your question 2 or 3, just make sure that you're the disciplined kind. I don't know you personally. I don't know whether you're disciplined or not. If you're the kind that always crosses over the time, then for goodness sake, start with your question 1, because your problem is time management. And the easy marks here is, if you have a look at it, you've got your professional marks. Yeah, it's so easy to at least get 3 out of the 4 professional marks inside here. And then in question 1, you have got those materiality marks where you have got 4. So here you might be able to get the 3 marks here, because the last mark is more for the clarity of your explanation. We've got 7 marks inside there. So can you imagine, if you don't have time to do this, it's an absolute, I mean, you would have lost out on those 7 marks. In no other question you have got that benefit of the 7 marks. And you have got to be absolutely disciplined with your time. If you're not disciplined with your time, chances are you won't make it. So talk to yourself tonight, stand in front of the mirror and say, be disciplined and follow the time, or something like that. All right. Now, on the area of short forms that we can use in the exam, the examiner usually does not complain about the short forms, but the normal short forms are SOPL, SOFP, you've got financial statements, these are the normal ones. Okay, and you can use lots of others like value in use, VIU, kind of a thing. The only time that we do not use short forms is where marks are given for writing it out in full. Like, for example, in your question 1, where you have got the headings and the subheadings. So the first heading might be audit risk, all right? Or the first heading might be the risk of material misstatement. So that one, I know ROMM, we can write it out in short, but remember 1 mark is given for the heading, you know. Yeah, so don't jeopardize that 1 mark. Don't let your examiner downgrade your 1 mark to half a mark. Can you imagine if you're on 49.5, the examiner is going to round it up to 50 and then you pass the exam. Yeah, so do not despise the humble 1 mark. All right. So whenever you're dealing with headings like this, and the other one is when you're dealing with the audit reports, yeah, there the technical terms are all very important. So although if you are not dealing with the audit report and you're talking about EOM, you're right, you can put EOM and everybody knows what it stands for because it does not mean anything else. Yeah. But if you're in the audit report, please, for goodness sake, write it out in full. So it's an emphasis of matter. And then if you want to put EOM, you can. All right. So that's fine as well. All right. The examiner has never complained about students using too many short forms, but when it matters, because this is a technical term in an audit report question, the examiner needs to know that you know it. All right. Same thing goes for NOCLA as well. I know it's a technical term, and even the documents issued by IAASB is also called NOCLA, I know, but it would be good that if you started off by just writing it out in full. Okay, you've got that. I mean, this was the little bit here that that lady who did the tutor exam review a couple of days ago, that's what she said. So before this, I would have just considered that as being a short form by itself. Everybody knows what a NOCLA is, but this was a specific question asked to that lady. So that lady said that NOCLA cannot mean anything else, but the point is the marker does not know whether you know what it stands for. You might just know that it's NOCLA and then call it something else. All right, so she says that, you know, this is based on the last 2 days, okay? Non-compliance. All right, so when it comes to technical terms, then please write it out in full and then put it in brackets. And the other thing that the lady said was, do not bring COVID into your answer at all. We're going to assume that 2021 is a non-COVID year, that COVID does not exist. All right? And the other thing that she said is that we are not going to bring in the ISA 315 revised. That one will only be examined in September 2021. By the time you would have graduated and had 3 kids already. Okay, so we're not going to talk about that. The examiner said that they will only bring it in after the article has been written. Then, again, I want to repeat the point about the data analytics. Hello, we are at the last few minutes here, so data analytics. Okay, so let me just explain this once again. Yeah, data analytics can be used to get information and to help with the audit. All right, but data analytics can also be used to understand underlying information. Understand information underlying the data. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about data analytics, yeah? So, in the September 2020 exam question, where we've got this question called Crux, where they asked you how data analytics could help with the efficiency. Now, efficiency is just that you're going to be able to provide the information more quickly. So here, to help with the audit would be to get information. To get information. All right, like in that particular question, you wanted information on cutoff because they were recognizing the revenue immediately, even at the start of the cruise. So we were very worried about the revenue recognition at the beginning of the year that crossed over the deadline, that your year end at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so you're using it to get this information. Now, we have had so many not so many, we have had some exam questions where the examiner asks you for additional information. Yeah, in the audit risk question, additional information. Like, for example, if let's say the exam question had a foreign subsidiary, then you know that the translation of the results would have to be using the spot rate, or an average rate can be used if there are no significant fluctuations, right? So what is the additional information that you want? The additional information that I want is the daily foreign exchange rate, so that I can see whether there's a significant fluctuation or not. Then I will know whether the client should be using a spot rate or whether average rate would be allowable. So in the usual audit risk questions, you've got this word additional information. Additional information is always, additional information, by the way, is not audit procedure. Okay, additional information is information so that you can better apply the accounting standards, like I explained to you just now. I want information about the daily foreign exchange rate so that I'll be able to see whether there has been significant fluctuations or not. Then I will allow the client to either use a average rate if it's not significant fluctuation, or if there is significant fluctuation, then I need to make sure that they're using the spot rate. Yeah? So this data analytics, if it's to do with this, like in the Crux question, it is very similar to additional information. Whereas this part here has not been examined on yet. So here, during the last class, remember we were talking about data analytics? Yeah. So this one, the examiner could give you a diagram here, and this is looking at the underlying data. This one, understand the information underlying the data. So let's go back to this diagram down here. I just want to repeat that. So here you have got journals that have been posted. So the examiner could give you this diagram here. And this one is journals posted by the finance people here. Yeah, which is fine. But they also, using data analytics, you'll be able to see whether the journals were posted during office hours or after office hours. And you can see here, this finance person here, let me just take out all my coloring here. This finance person here, he posted quite a lot of entries during working hours, but then there's a whole lot of other journals that he posted after working hours as well. And what's that? So here, we're not looking at this diagram here. It's not about this part. This diagram here is about this part, the underlying information about when the journal entries were, when the journal entries were actually posted and who posted them. Whether it was during a weekday or weekend. Then you got HR people. Oh my goodness, what is HR doing with journal entries? Journal entries are very much of a finance function. What are they doing? And the HR people are doing some after working hours, which is so weird. And worse still, if you look at the average value of their journal entries, it's even more than the finance people. What are these guys up to? I've got absolutely no idea. And then you got the board of directors posting journals. Have you ever heard of board of directors posting journals? Do they even know to debit what or credit what? What are they doing? And I know it's during the office hours, but the point is they shouldn't be doing that at all, right? So this kind of question has not been examined on yet, where the examiner gives you a diagram, a dashboard that has been obtained as a result of using the data analytics, where you can see the underlying data behind the journals on who is posting and when they're posting, and the average value of what they're posting, and should they be posting at all. So this one is taken from an ACCA AAA question. Yeah. So far, we've only had that. We've not had this one. So this one could come out this time around. Remember, data analytics is not a current issue anymore. It is now in the syllabus, which means that it is more likely to appear on a regular basis. I don't know whether it's going to come out in March. Maybe the examiner will give us a bit of a breathing space because it came out in September, but then it didn't come out in December, so maybe it'll come out in March. I don't know. No idea. All right. Now, the other thing here, last thing before we go, and that is the lady who was talking in the last 2 days in the tutor exam review webinar. They talked about the students getting 45 to 49 marks. Why do people get these kind of marks? And she says it is usually as a result of lack of depth. All right. So when you talk about lack of depth, what are we talking about? Well, if you're talking about an ethics question, yeah, we're thinking about this. And also in an ethics question, the threat is not properly explained as to the impact on the behavior, right? And when you're dealing with a risk question, an audit risk question, then we are thinking about OMRE. So again, there's inadequate depth. So the danger here is I see that students take that risk and the impact and they join it together as one sentence. You cannot do it as one sentence because the marks are separate. There's the mark for the risk and there's a mark for the impact as well. All right. So that was confirmed by that lady in the tutor exam review as well. So please follow the exam technique. And then when you're talking about the quality control part of things, we've also got the OCSOTN. Yeah. When you've got the area of skepticism, then we're thinking about the observation, make a comment. Why is it ridiculous? The comment will be, this is ridiculous. And why is it ridiculous? And now what are you going to do about it? All right. So the exam techniques are necessary in order for your answers to have sufficient depth. So you have to remember that. Okay. And another reason that she said also is that all right, lack of relating the answers to the facts in this scenario. So as much as possible, say in this case, bring in the name of the client, the name of whatever, the dollar values. Yeah, so you're bringing as much information from the question as possible. So if your answer lacks depth or lacks relating the answer to the facts in the scenario, chances are you're going to be there if you have studied. All right, so crossing over the 50% mark is not very difficult. You just got to watch this. Is that all right? So that's it. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? If there's nothing, then we're finished for tonight. Oh my goodness, it's 10:40 already. All right. So do you have any particular area that you want me to cover?